Hey there, it's Michael. Welcome to Whole Again, the show that can help you navigate today's uncertainty with more mindfulness, resilience, and grace. And today, I have a very exciting episode to bring to you because it's book launch time. That's right. Our special guest, Dr. Shawn Andrews, and I wrote a book that came out yesterday. I'm recording this today, so hopefully today we are celebrating the fact that our book, The 5 Levels of Male Allyship, has become a new release bestseller because this book is critical for the moment we share together to help make work culture work better, to help us feel whole again at work. Because we feel divided at work as we do in today's society. So this book is part of the Urishi of our kintsugi to help us find a way to come together. Shawn is a professor at the University of California at Irvine. She's an accomplished speaker and author. She's a friend. She's a fellow cyclist. And I'm so eager to share our book with you and your colleagues and companies. It's based on a framework I created back in 2016 because I felt we weren't trying to include men in the inclusion conversation at work. There was far too much shame and blame and not enough inclusion and understanding and coming together so we can walk forward, or in my world and Shawn's, pedal forward together. We wrote our book to help meet men where men are at today and to help them understand what steps they can take to become a better ally. It's also written for any leader that cares about strong culture, who knows that a strong, cohesive culture, a culture of belonging, allows their team to fully tap into their potential. And the book comes out at a very interesting time, a very interesting moment in our history. Last year, there was great pushback on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And I'll be the first one to say many of those efforts, especially after 2020, failed to hit the mark. They were too performative. They had too much shame and blame woven into them. Our approach is completely different. We feel this is the time to release this book because culture, whatever we happen to call the initiatives behind it, still matters. In fact, it matters so much more today with AI rapidly advancing. We need to find a way to come together because this work that we get to do is about being a better human to other humans. And I know you're going to love Shawn as I do. She brings great wisdom, data, scientific rigor, humor, empathy, and understanding to all the work that she does to help others create better work culture. So if you're ready to discover a bit more about Dr. Shawn Andrews and our new book, The 5 Levels of Male Allyship, I'll encourage you to take a deep breath in and a slow releasing breath out and take a listen and discover how you might help your work better. Shawn, my friend, good to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Michael. This is so exciting to be on your podcast for the first time.
I know, it's pretty cool. And then the day after our book, which we'll talk about, The 5 Levels of Male Allyship, was released. And obviously, we're recording this prior to the book's release. So I hope today we are celebrating in some form or fashion the fact that the book is a bestseller and a hot new release. And for folks listening, you can still help us with that, but we'll share more about the book here in a bit. So I want to start off with a few questions for folks to get to know you a little bit better, Shawn.
Okay.
So if people check out your website, they learn that you're into drumming.
Uh-huh.
You're a musician.
Uh-huh.
So here's the question. Name a favorite drummer or two. Do
Oh,
you
that's
have do you
easy.
have one?
Oh, for sure, for sure.
All right. So who are they? Do tell. And
Yes, if you
curious
ask
minds want to know.
any drummer who their favorite drummer is, especially around my age, 50 somethings, um,
A Gen X generation drummer. Okay. All right.
you got it. Gen X. Neil Peart from Rush comes
Yes.
top of the mind. I mean,
Yes, that's the proper answer. That this means we can continue the interview and conversation here on Whole Again. If you said anything else but Neil's name, I don't know, we would have to prematurely close down this whole conversation.
Neil, the stuff he does is just so far above everyone else. His off signature, his off beats, his speed. I mean, it's amazing. His timing. Yeah, I would say a more modern uh, drummer would be Carter Buford from Dave Matthews Band.
Oh yeah.
He's a lot like Neil Peart, where he does a lot of the off signature, fast, crazy stuff. But yeah, Neil's got to be the top of the list.
So how did you get into the drums? And what was the reaction from your parents when you're like, "Hey, I want to get into drums"? Did it start when you were a kid or did it come a little bit later in life?
It actually started earlier than that. I used to beat on the crib when I was a baby. Like I'd tap on the crib, and then I got a little older. I'd be in the car and I'd tap on the back of the car seats, and it drove my parents crazy. So they took a clue and got me a toy drum set when I was about 5, and so I stuck with it and played it. And then they got me a real drum set, kind of a starter kit, when I was maybe 11 or 12. A red sparkle pearl kit. Played that up through high school, and then I, for the first time, got in a band. I joined the marching band, and I
Right.
joined the jazz band and concert band, and so I learned to read music. But I mostly play by ear. I don't really sight read. But that was all good. Learning and discipline for music was my high school band experience, and then I got in college and I joined, got in kind of rock band, progressive rock, and we actually were an original band creating our own music, and we started gigging. And so that was my first experience gigging with a band. And so yeah, so it's progressed. And then since then, I've been in several cover bands, I've been in original bands, and I've done some studio work as well.
Well, very cool. So the whole like later in life getting into bands and doing gigs may change or soften what I was going to share earlier. And I say this with all the love in my heart, but like you are officially like a band geek member. Like you joined the band. I say this too because my wife was in the band in high school, so she's a band geek.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you were into Rush, which is very niche. So you were in that whole genre growing up is like a little bit of like owning your own geekiness and nerdiness in a very Gen X way. And then coming out of it, flourishing and doing gigs and the whole thing. I just love it. That's awesome.
Well, I have to say, I was only a band geek for 1 year. I took it just my freshman year, and I had to make a decision my sophomore year because I was also playing softball and volleyball, and I couldn't do all of it. And so
Okay.
I had to make a decision. So I decided to drop band and do softball, but I've continued playing. And so even though I wasn't taking formal band, for my later high school years, I played and then got in real bands in college, and I even recently, at Christmas, I went to Scottsdale to visit my sister, and she had a band. She had a party, and she had a band there. And I sat in with the band, and they liked me so much they invited me to come to the club the next day to gig with them, and I did.
Wow.
And I haven't played the kit in front of an audience in years. And I played for an hour at a bar with them. It was so fun.
That is so cool. That is rock star status. I love it. I love it. So here on Whole Again, I believe music is medicine. That's one of the reasons why I asked you that question. I also believe that, you know, movement is medicine. Movement in nature is medicine. So, do you have a favorite place in nature that really helps you feel connected?
Probably the Probably the beach, I would say.
Ah, yes.
I mean, I like mountains, I like lakes, streams, but probably the beach. You get a lot of if you've ever read on the negative ions that the beach gives off, and I think it has maybe something to do with that. But I just like you feel refreshed, renewed when you go down to take a walk on the beach and just watch the birds and boats and just
Yeah, I
people and
love it. Yeah. Well, you're in a great location in California to be able to like just get over there and watch the waves come in, and there's an energy to the beach.
yes,
There's the energy to the ocean, and heck, if the oceans can you know, have some special dance with the moon, there's something in the universe that's sort of, well, it's just unexplainable that we don't necessarily know what's happening, and it's good to be in positions where we don't fully know. And so
yeah.
I think that's a really healthy way to like go through life. So all right, so now that we've covered those two questions, Sean, like how the heck did we get here? So let's start. We'll talk about our book, The 5 Levels of Male Allyship. I'm going to see how many times I can say that during our whole conversation. You can pick it up at your nearest bookstore or Amazon or any independent bookstore like Powell's,
You,
perhaps in Portland, Oregon.
I'll pick it up right now
You
and
can
show
pick it
you.
up there. That's
Yes.
perfect. So, so can you share a bit more about your non-drummer life background? Like, how did you come into this topic of leadership and management and work culture inclusion? So if you can share more about your background, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I had to really think about. Someone asked me that when I first, with my first book and my dissertation research, which was on leadership and gender, essentially. And they asked me like, why, what made you interested in this? And I had to really rack my brain, but I think inherently, like I am an includer, and inherently, I believe in inclusion. I believe everyone should have a voice. We should have equality and equity and everything else. Even going back to my early, looking when I was younger, like in college, for example, when I looked back, I remembered that I was a note taker for disabled student services. So even then, I wanted to reach out and make sure everyone was included and help other people. And I did that all through college. And then Strength Finders, some of your listeners may know it's, tool that's been around forever. When I do Strength Finders, one of my top 5 strengths is includer. And so,
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
Perfect. A perfect alignment. Go Gallup and Strength Finders. That's awesome.
yeah, totally. And like, so, well, I think I've always just valued inclusion and making sure no one's left out, and making sure everyone, paying attention to those who maybe need some help or maybe underserved. And uh so it took me writing the books and looking back to realize that. But so I was drawn. So when I started my doctoral program back in 2010, they asked us pretty early on, because it's a 2-year program and then you do a dissertation. And they asked us early on, what are you going to study? And at the time, the McKinsey Women in the Workplace study had just come out, and it's the largest study to date on the state of women in the workplace. And when I looked at that, I was, like most people, shocked at the data. But then I was really curious about what is behind this. Why we're in the 21st century. Why are we still talking about leadership gaps and gender and race? Particularly in gender. Why do we still have this? Why are we still talking about it? So that's what drove me to study the topic in my dissertation, as I looked at all the barriers that women and men experience as well, but women to a greater extent. What holds women back? How can men and women work better together? Looking at leadership and emotional intelligence from a gendered perspective. So all that is kind of under that DEI umbrella. I didn't realize it at the time. Thought I was just looking at leadership and gender, but it turns out it's all under DEI. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
so that led to my first book, The Power of Perception. That's essentially based on my dissertation research. And then this book is actually very much aligned with that because we're still talking about leadership. We're talking about inclusion. We're still talking about gender, but we're focused on helping men and supporting men and being better allies to, to women and people of color. So it's really very much aligned, I think, with that original research and just my passion and my interests, I think.
Yeah, I love what you shared just now because it's part curiosity, part thinking beyond oneself to how do you connect others and bring others in. Really in sort of in the spirit of in one way of helping us feel whole again when we feel that connection. One of the things that we shared in our book, when people get the videos after taking the assessment, is that we go far together, right? The book, Five Levels of Male Allyship. So, so I love your answer in response to that question. I am also curious. Sometimes we do teach or we get interested in things that we have felt maybe the suffering or pain from. So, were there times in your professional career where you felt maybe like an outsider, or you didn't feel, or you felt the impact of the gender divide or gender inequality that further fueled your interest in this topic?
You know, not there's not a specific incidents I could point to about that. I think it's just the general inequities in structures and systems and processes that work. If you go back to the history of work, work was designed by men to benefit, to align with men's ways of thinking and feeling. Women came into the workforce in large numbers in the 80s. They were certainly there in the 70s and 60s, but not in large numbers. So women enter into this system and this structure, and it's cultures that are really designed more for men and men's interests. And so women have had to adapt to working in mostly male cultures and almost industry agnostic across the board. So I've always been aware of that as a woman in corporate America, I've certainly had to adjust, but I haven't experienced like outward, biases, discrimination, things like that, inequities for me in particular, but I've certainly noticed overall inequities, and I've seen many, and there's been a lot written about this, but I've seen many incompetent men be promoted over very competent women or people of color that certainly don't get the opportunities. And I've seen that, of course, being in corporate America, and I think it's just having the awareness of it and wanting corporate cultures to be more equitable and more inclusive, because I truly believe we all benefit when those cultures are more inclusive. And so I think it's more about just the quest for having more inclusion and better cultures that's going to benefit everybody, including companies.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, Sean. That's one of the reasons I think we make a dynamic duo, if you will. There's so much potential that we leave on the table
Yes.
when we don't come together in the way that we can.
Hmm.
There's so much, learning and development that goes on in every industry across this country, the US, across the world. And a lot of it is window dressing and not deep enough to really find a way to come together, to really tap into that potential. That's
Yes.
why I'm so encouraged by what our book can do,
Hmm.
especially in this time that we all share in this era, if you will. I would love for you to share like your vantage point. People will hear me talk about like how I thought our book came to be, but I would love for you to share like your perspective, like how did this book come to be? Like what like cuz I always love to ask authors like
Yeah.
why this book and like why now?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so as as an author, I have my answer to this, but I'd love for you to share a little bit more again from your perspective of how do we get here?
Yeah, well, that one's actually easy to answer. So we address that in the introduction of the book. We talk about, kind of how we met, but given that, I mean, you and I am so I'm always continually amazed at how much we have in common and how we have very similar beliefs, and we had two completely different childhoods growing up in different
Yeah,
environments. But yet
absolutely.
we're so similar in what we believe and what we feel. So, in our roles as HBA Healthcare Businesswoman Association chapter presidents, I think it was 2019. We had you out as a speaker at one of our HBA Orange County events in California, and your topic, I can't remember the exact name of your topic, something about inviting men into the inclusion conversation or something
Yeah,
like that.
how to it was the title of the talk was how to include men in the inclusion conversation.
Okay. And this was 2019, right? It was right before COVID, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was either 2019 or like we'll go back to the how we talk about it in the book, but and it might have been 2020. It might have been just like days
Oh,
before,
may have been.
like
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because I was out there at Huntington Beach, California, for a cycling camp, and then you know, multitasked and came to your chapter's event. So I think it happened right before then, if
Okay.
I'm not mistaken. But the years tend to blend as I get older, Shawn. So so who knows? But it was around that time period.
So I started my business as a speaker, consultant, author, and teaching as a professor. I started in 2015. So I had been in my business for about 5 years at that point. So I'd been speaking about, women in leadership and gender differences and inequities and DEI and biases. So I had had like 5 years experience doing that. But then your talk in 2020, this makes sense actually, because you were at the halfway point. So 2020, you come and speak to our chapter, and this is verbatim what happened. Is I'm sitting in the audience and I'm listening to you, and you were alluding to kind of segmented types of men. And I'd never heard anybody actually break down men into segments like that. And I literally sat there thinking, he is onto something. Those were
Wow.
my exact thoughts were he is onto something and nobody is talking about this. And no one was talking about this. I mean,
And,
allyship has been
and until our book, still
until our
not
book.
enough,
Yeah,
not too many people are still talking about it. But hopefully, with our book, they'll talk about it a little bit more frequently. Yes.
that's right. And the general, allyship and equity and mentorship and mentors, and that'd been around for just been around for decades. But the characterization and this kind of the categories and the segmentation of men, no one was talking about it. And I loved what you were saying during that talk. And so I took notes and I kept it in the back of my mind. And I have found over the next, so when did we start this book? This is 2025, twenty twenty
At the
four.
end of
So
2024. Yeah.
so about 4 years, I had been noodling on this, right? And I kept it in the back of my mind, and I never forgot it because I found that I kept coming back to it, and I kept thinking, the segments of men, this is where it's at. We have to be talking about this because we need more allies. We all need more allies, right? But if you're a person of color or a woman in the workplace, given the inequities that we just talked about in systems and cultures, we definitely need allies and men in particular, because most men are in decision making positions of power even today. So it's critically important to have men as part of the conversation. And so I came to the realization that we will get nowhere near gender parity, any type of parity, without men on board. Period. And that's what made me realize, okay, we need to delve into more about what Michael was alluding to back in 2020. So yeah, I don't know if you've told your listeners this part, but I reached out to you and said, Michael, I'm submitting a book proposal. I really want to do this, and let's flush this thing out. Let's put some meat on the bones, and let's put some details and interview some folks, and voila, here you go. Here we are.
Voila. Yeah. So I haven't shared with with the listeners of Whole Again's heard the backstory completely from my perspective. So I'll pick up where you just left off. So when you did reach out to me to say, "Hey, I want to write a new book and I want to use your archetype framework as the foundation of the book," will you co-author the book with me? My first thought was, well, it's very sweet of Shawn to reach out, but my second thought was like, I don't have time for this. Like, I just like, oh my God, I like just another project. Because at the time I was still trying to get my Pause, Breathe, Reflect app off the ground and starting, and so I was putting a disproportional amount of my energy into that project. But then I sat with it as I do, little space to think. And because I admire and respect you so much, I was like, okay, we're going to find a way to make it work. And I'm so glad we did, because I think right now is such an important time for the book to come out. And I do want to talk about that. But yeah, so I originally came up with those archetypes, which the original design was 7, and into the book we bring it down to 5 to make it a little bit more straightforward. But I used 7 for whatever reason. I was slicing and dicing men, but I saw, because I've been in this field of inclusion since really 2003 more formally, but I saw what was happening right around 2016, where I felt we were getting too hung up or putting too much of our attention on that guy who is quite resistant to all of
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to prove that the way we saw it, we were right in trying to promote more diversity, equity, inclusion. And hey, dude, hey, bro, you're wrong. We're right, you're wrong. And all that does is it creates friction and not conversation, and it doesn't bring about any change. And I felt like I would sit in these workshops and I would leave very frustrated because I thought we had missed an opportunity to talk to some of the men who were already there, that, like, at least from my, self-reflection, so, was trying to act as an ally, or guys that were really curious about how to lean in to allyship further, but we weren't speaking to them. All we were doing is telling that guy who was resistant, "Hey, you're wrong, buddy. We're right." And the way we said it, and the we is basically the professionals or the leaders or gurus, experts, influencers in this space of inclusion. The tone we took was, "Hey, bro, you're just not that smart. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're smarter than you. Like, we're enlightened, and this is the enlightened pathway. And you're sort of in the dark ages, slow and stupid."
Mm-hmm.
That may not have been the intent, but that's certainly how it landed for a lot of those guys who I know. And I felt like, wow, like, well, we're not going to change anything. Brene Brown taught us this. We're not going to change anything through shame and blame. We got to find a way to bring them along. But we can't forget 80% of the other guys that we might be able to bring along and take a step closer to allyship. So that's why I created that. And I was like, this is something, because no group is monolithic,
Yeah.
including men. And so we should be talking to and talking with everyone, maybe a bit differently to meet them where they happen to be. And I think that's a better way to have a conversation. So around this whole idea, Shawn, about, look, why now? And I do think
Mhm.
our book coming out right now is really important, but I'd love to get your perspective, because certainly last year, 2025, there was tremendous pushback on
Mhm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion, really right off the start of the year. In fact, the
Mhm.
horrific helicopter plane crash in DC that was in
Mhm.
January of last year, the initial thought was, well, the cause of it was because of diversity, equity, inclusion efforts.
That's
The,
right.
the pilots weren't competent.
Right.
And so, like, right off, a huge backlash. And we saw universities suffering. We saw companies running away from initiatives, changing language, making consulting firms richer by changing happy to glad and glad to happy or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so one could argue, like, hey, Michael, Sean, Michael, you guys, this isn't wise to come out with a book around allyship right now. It's, it's too political. It's too fill in the blank. But what say you? Why is this the right time for this book?
Well, I would say just the opposite. Actually, this is the perfect time for this book because of the DEI backlash that's been driven by this administration. So, DEI has become a political hot potato. It's become a dirty word, a four-letter word. And we all know, I think the vast majority of people truly believe in the value of diversity and equity and inclusion. They want workplaces that have more, um, more of those things. And I think the vast majority of people truly believe in it. But given the political environment around us, companies are being conservative. They've pulled back. They've changed language. They're not even doing, workshops. They're not even doing leadership development or anymore. Not to the same extent they were just a few years ago, a couple years ago. So there's been this massive pullback, and it's all under this, DEI is a bad thing, under this DEI umbrella. And I think once we see a change in administration, whenever that is, um, I think the pendulum's going to swing back. But because I truly believe, in my heart of hearts, the vast majority of people, believe in DEI, and there's mountains of data. I think everyone knows. Of course, you have more diverse people in the room, you're going to have more diverse ideas and more engagement and more collaboration and all that. So the data's there and people believe in it, but it's just we're in such a strange political time. So I think it's the perfect time for a book like this because allyship is something that we all need. We need people to help us in our careers. We need people to advocate for us, when we're not in the room. And so, and we need a whole diverse network of allies. But we all need more. We definitely need more male allies for the reason I mentioned earlier. Vast majority of positions of power are still held by men across nearly every industry. I would even say all industries. If you look at leadership, leadership is men. And so men have a really unique opportunity to step up and be allies and help others along the way so we can all benefit. And so I think even with the DEI pushback that's swirling around us right now, it's a great time to reach out to men and say, you know what, we understand the environment we're in. And as you know, we do speak to that in the book. We have a whole section on the whole DEI pushback and where it comes from and our thoughts on it. But I think it's a great time because everyone needs allies right now. And so providing a framework like we have and guidelines, for men and for women actually to how do you identify allies? How do you develop and create allies? How do you we understand you may be maybe at level 1 or 2, but you want to be at level 4 or 5. How do we help you get there? And so laying it out as we have, I think is really going to benefit a lot of people.
So for that guy that might be listening, who might say, okay, yeah, I get what you guys are saying, but I don't know about this. Like some of the past practices that I had to sit through or past trainings, it just felt like other people were advancing and all this DE and I stuff, I was actually losing. So I didn't feel any benefit. So why should I care about this? For the guy that might be feeling that way, how would you respond to him, Shawn, in terms of what could be the benefit in becoming an ally, sort of the WIFM, if you will?
Oh yeah. Well, fortunately, that actually there's tons of benefits for men in becoming an ally. Uh, I'll just let me just list some of them. And data is behind every one of these. That when men step into allyship, they become more empathetic, more curious about others. Um, they are they listen with the intent to learn, which helps their own development. Um, they have more of an abundance mindset instead of a scarcity mindset. So it just kind of opens up their perspectives. Um, they learn about trust. They get ideas. They get better at collaboration, advocating for others again when they're not in the room. Um, and then they're also often viewed as, kind of valued rainmakers within their companies, are kind of the go-to guy. And so men who serve as mentors, allies for others are often looked to as leaders. And so there's a whole host of benefits to men when they do step into allyship. Building Here's some others: building larger, more diverse networks. Well, that's going to benefit men, right? Having more diverse networks, gaining knowledge, creating more inclusive cultures, which is going to help them and their teams. They even help their company's bottom line when more men step into allyship. So, and there's even actually one study out there that showed that men become better husbands and fathers, which is probably the most lofty benefit on the list, right? You become a better dad, you become a better partner when you serve as an ally for other people.
That's so
So,
cool. I love it. I do think, like, sort of in our spirit here at Whole Again, we use the Japanese art form of kintsugi, where pottery breaks and it comes back together. Clearly, we feel in our society that we are divided. Some may say we're broken, like work culture is broken, and through allyship, the glue that brings the pottery together to create the kintsugi is called yurishi. That yurishi is very similar to, I think, what we're trying to share in the book, is like through allyship, that can be the glue that can bring work cultures together. And to your point, as you just answered, Shawn, can really benefit all of us. And that's as cliche as this is, a rising tide lifts all ships, right? There's opportunity that comes to everyone. It may not be equal across the board, but there's opportunity in it for everyone. And once we start to realize that, then it's easier to see the world through other abundant lenses, more
mhm,
infinite lenses, more opportunities for all of us. And it doesn't come with such friction
mhm,
or tension or stress that a lot of companies that don't embrace allyship feel, because they're operating through a finite lens or a scarcity model, and so
mhm.
they're restricted. So one of the things that we also have in common, besides our love of work culture, inclusion, our love of Rush, great band out of Toronto. One of my current favorite bands out of Toronto is a band called Beaches. So it's a
Oh,
great band. So they're awesome. But we are also cyclists. So in the book, we use a cycling reference
mm.
called a peloton. And so I'd love for you to share, like, what a peloton is for those that don't know.
Yeah, and actually, this leads perfectly into what the comment I was just going to make. So yeah, Peloton is, it's, like to think of it as your posse. It's people around you that support you, that help you ride faster. You conserve energy, and you're safer in the group. And so, um, if you have a Peloton to surround you, and help you go further, faster, less energy, feel safer, we all should be striving for that. But I was just thinking as you were talking about, you asked about the benefits of allyship, and I was thinking there is a subtle nuance we probably should explain to your listeners. So there's mentors, and there's allies, and there's sponsors. And I'll get back to the Peloton in a minute. In a sec, this will loop back to the Peloton. So a mentor helps you in your current role, helps you develop in your current role. So maybe your listening skills or your speaking skills or whatever it is, your negotiating skills. So a mentor helps you develop in your current role. A sponsor helps you get to that next role. So maybe they are advocating for you, when you're not in the room, and advocating and talking, good about you. Michael really should be promoted. Michael's fantastic, things like that. But an ally is someone who is with you the entire way. An ally is someone who supports you. So I like to think of a Peloton as like a group of allies as well. So it ties in nicely with the book because it's, allies support you. They help you go further, faster. You feel safer when you have allies. You feel more included when you have allies in your Peloton. So, yeah. So I think it ties in nicely.
Oh, that's perfect. A great response. I love that. Like bringing in all those different characters into the Peloton. The Peloton can be made up of a lot of different roles. And for those that, to further explain it, think Tour de France, all those cyclists in Lycra, they make up a Peloton. I love your word, posse, Shawn. It's your squad,
Yeah.
your team. I love it. So this this whole concept of creating more inclusive work culture that feels like belonging is hard work, right? And I believe that we can do hard things. And last year you did something pretty hard. You rode your bike across the country from
I
Portland,
did.
Oregon to Portland, Maine. My wife is from Portland, Oregon, so that Portland is the better Portland in my humble opinion because I found that Portland via marriage, so they win. But that hard thing that you did, you rode across the country, you know, I'd love for you to share, like, how how did you do that? And I think there might be some themes that we can apply to this work we're trying to do and help others sort of step into the ride, if you will, clip in, if you will. Um, like, how do we go about doing hard things like cycling across America and creating better work culture?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, so that this was a bucket list thing for me, probably as it was for you, I'm guessing too, when you
Absolutely,
did.
yeah. Since I was a wee little kid, I dreamt of riding my bike across the country.
Wow. My earliest memory is in my 20s for some reason. Not quite high school. I think I was in college when I first heard about like ride across America and race across America. I thought, wow, that'd be a really cool way to see the US and what a cool thing to do. So it's been on my list for almost 30 years and 25 maybe. And this just happened to be the right time. Everything came together and I did it. But yeah, as far as analogies, hard work, definitely. This was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. It was not a walk in the park, even though I had trained for almost a year. It was not an easy feat. The back to back riding, the hills, the whole thing was hilly, except a couple days that were relatively flat. But there are hills, and the hills are not my favorite thing. And so, yeah, it was not easy, and it was all about perseverance, and it was about getting up and doing it again and learning, making tweaks and learning. So if you apply that to allyship, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, Michael, but definitely hard work. It can be hard work, you have to show up. You have to be persistent. You have to be consistent at it. Whether you're cycling across the country or you're stepping into your allyship. And so I think there are those few analogies there. And at the end, when I was so happy to finally be done. But when I look back, it was such an accomplishment.
Yeah.
I felt like there's nothing I can't do on the bike now, after doing that. But you have to persevere, and it's not always going to be easy, and you have to get through the hard days and just stay focused on the kind of the bigger goal at the end. In my case, it was Portland, Maine, but just getting there. And I think you could probably think of allyship in the same way.
Yeah, I really think you can. Perseverance to stay in it. When I look at doing hard things, it's having the big goal,
Hmm.
riding across the country or creating more inclusive work culture. And then you ease your grip on that final destination. Because if you grip too tightly on that, we can be too far out over our skis to mix a metaphor. But it's like holding it loosely, and then it is in a classic analogy, pedal stroke by pedal stroke. It's
Mm,
like it's the day in and day out, the perseverance, as you mentioned. And some days are going to be pretty easy. Like, hey, we got this allyship, we got
mm,
this whole culture thing. And then the winds will change or the weather changes, as it will.
mhm.
And whatever conditions that we have, they get more difficult. It could be corporate change. It could be new leadership. It could be a whole host of different things. A new administration comes in, right?
Yeah.
So, and we have to continue to find a way, even in those times, to continue to pedal, to lean on our Peloton, to know that we take pedal stroke by pedal stroke day in and day out. And it may not feel like we're making any progress at all. I know probably as you were going up some of those hills, you probably felt like, oh my God, I'm not making any progress. I'm going so slow. This sucks. It's so hard. And then you kept doing it. And then you got to the top and you look back and when we reach our final destination, now with a ride across America, we do reach the final destination. The work around work culture and inclusion and belonging,
Mhm,
that work continues long after we have passed away or have retired. But that's the most meaningful work that we can do is the work that really has no end. And if we get to that point at the end of our careers, and we step in or clip into allyship, we can look back and see, wow, we actually made a whole bunch of progress.
mhm,
Pedal stroke by pedal stroke, day in and day out. Some days were easier. Some days,
mhm.
wind conditions, weather, as I mentioned, flat tires, mechanicals.
Yeah.
But we found a way through.
Mhm,
And when I first started learning to do mountain biking in college, when mountain biking first became like a popular thing in the US, it's maybe not as popular now because there's gravel bikes and road bikes, and a lot of people train inside. But one of my mentors at the time that was teaching us how to do mountain biking in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, when it came to an obstacle, like crossing a stream or getting over a rock or a log, our natural inclination was to stop,
mm,
especially going through a stream that might be wide. We would stop pedaling and we would lose all of our momentum and then we would tip over.
mm,
And he encouraged us, all these college kids that were trying to figure this out. He said, you got to keep pedaling through the obstacles. You got to keep pedaling over the rock, over the log or the sticks, through the
mhm.
stream. Keep pedaling. That's how you keep your momentum. Your momentum will help you get through the obstacle. And I think the same could be said for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Last year was a big obstacle,
Mhm,
and a lot of people stopped pedaling. A lot of people said, this is the end of our glory days of inclusion progress, and I'm going to
mhm,
do something else. I'm going to pivot. And they
mhm,
stop pedaling when it comes to this work on trying to help work cultures feel whole again.
mhm.
My encouragement to all of us is that we need to find a way to keep pedaling,
Yeah.
even though the conditions have maybe changed, not in the favor of allyship, but hopefully through our book and some other teaching that we do, people can see there's a way to bring everyone along for the ride. And when that happens, I think we're just better off.
Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, def
So,
I like that, the stop pedaling analogy. I think it's exactly what a lot of, or a lot of companies have done. Because
yes.
of fear of political retribution or what their clients or customers may think, they have stopped pedaling. And so, uh, just not investing. I mean, and going back to our earlier comments about the workplace being broke, it is broke for many people because if you look at the, stats around workforce engagement, it's terrible. Like 20 or 30% of employees are actually engaged in their work. Vast majority of people are not engaged in what they do every day. So engagements, numbers are terrible. That drives retention. So if you're not happy in your job, you're not engaged, you're going to leave it. You're not satisfied. You're not producing, for your company. So your company's bottom line's going to be impacted. So the whole thing is, the whole stop peddling thing is causing negative downstream effects, and it's going to continue doing that unless we keep pedaling and realize that we need to develop our people. We need to have people step up as allies. We need to engage men. We need to still have a goal of inclusive cultures and creating more belonging and more equity in our workplaces, because we're leaving talent on the table, and the talent that's there are going to leave if they don't feel invested in and engaged.
Absolutely. And men are included in those low engagement numbers. Men
Mm,
are struggling at work as well.
yeah.
When you think about just the times that we live in, we're all feeling it. I think we all feel
Mm,
the overwhelm that's happening in today's society and the pressure at work.
mhm,
And by coming together, we can, well, as we say, I think we can go far together.
mhm,
But we have to come together in order to be able to realize that. So,
yeah.
um, is there anything I didn't ask you, Shawn, but should have asked you?
No, I just thinking as you were talking is men need allies also, right? Because you're right, we're all feeling it. We're all disengaged or maybe hurting, economically or whatever it may be. Men need allies. Women certainly can also and should step up to be allies as well for others. But the focus of our book, and I think rightly, probably our main focus should be on men be, stepping up as allies, because men are in the perfect positions to do so. So I think we could do both. We could support men and what they may be going through and meet them where they're at. But I think we also can help them step into better allyship and more allyship. So I think we can do both. We can support them, but also provide them a way forward, and a framework and guidelines for, or a guidebook, for how to become a better ally. So
That's
yeah.
good. Well, I think that's a good point to close on. So,
Mm.
Shawn, thank you for being in my Peloton and inviting me into this book. It's been a real privilege. As I mentioned earlier, I had my hesitations when you first asked me, and I'm so glad I didn't listen to my first thought, but I actually came up with a second thought that said, yes, let's do it. And so I'm very grateful to have been on this ride with you to date, and I can't wait to see how far we go.
Likewise, my friend. It's been a great journey so far, and I look forward to exciting things in the future.
Well, there you have it. I just love Shawn. I love the fact that she is in my Peloton, and I had an opportunity to co-write the 5 levels of male allyship with her. I know this will be an important book for companies across industries, whether they buy into allyship completely or they might be a bit more traditional. Our book will help any company perform better because they'll have a stronger culture. And as Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we can call it whatever we want to call it, but full stop, your work culture matters. And we need everyone involved in the conversation to make it better. You can pick up our book at Amazon, independent bookstores near you, and within it, you'll find the first allyship assessment so you can understand what your primary allyship approach is and practical action steps you can take to become a stronger ally. I'll put the link in the show notes to order your copy of the book. And if you'd like to order copies for your team, reach out to Shawn or me and we'll set you up. I'll also put a link to learn more about Shawn via her website and her LinkedIn profile so you can connect with her there. As always, thank you for being part of our community here on Whole Again. I hope you'll take the step and join us in trying to create better allies everywhere so we can feel whole again at work. And if you haven't yet joined me over on Substack, you can. The link is in the show notes as well. Over there, you'll find my writing, and we also do live meditations throughout the week, usually on Mondays and Fridays, and I do some teaching as well through a live Substack once a week. Again, thanks for being here. And if you wish to learn more about creating beautiful ripples and how to prevent a bad moment from turning into a bad day, please visit my website, michaelobrienshift.com, and sign up for my newsletter called The Ripple Effect. And join us each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here at Whole Again and discover how you can heal, grow, and become more resilient, and celebrate our scars as golden symbols of strength and resilience. Until then, remember, you can always come back to your breath. You've got this, and we've got you.